The lights were hotter than I ever imagined, the clock ticking down to my family's $20,000 dream. With millions watching, I leaned into Steve Harvey and whispered three words that had defined my entire life. The lights were hotter than I ever imagined. Not like a warm, comforting spotlight, but like a relentless, interrogating glare that threatened to melt the cheap polyester suit I'd borrowed from my brother-in-law. My palms were so slick with sweat I was afraid to high-five my own son, Leo, after he nailed another top answer. Name something a person might accidentally leave on the roof of their car. Leo, without missing a beat, slammed the buzzer. "Their coffee!" he yelled, a confident grin plastered on his 19-year-old face. The board lit up. Number one answer. The studio audience roared. I clapped until my hands stung, a fake smile plastered on my face, while my stomach did backflips. We were the Miller family, and we were crushing it. My wife, Sarah, stood beside me, her knuckles white as she gripped the podium. Every time we scored, she'd let out a little gasp, a mix of shock and relief. Next to Leo was my sister, Carol, the loud, boisterous one who had signed us up for this madness in the first place. And then there was me, Dave, the team captain, the dad, the anchor, and the biggest fraud on national television. You see, there's a secret I've carried with me my whole life, a shame so heavy it felt like a physical weight on my shoulders. It was the reason I worked in construction, a job where you build with your hands, not with your words. It was the reason Sarah handled all the bills and read our daughter's bedtime stories. It was the reason Leo had been reading me the newspaper since he was 10 years old, pretending he was just practicing for school. I couldn't read, not in any functional sense. I could make out simple words like stop or exit. I could sign my own name. But a sentence, a paragraph, a question on a game show monitor? It was just a jumble of meaningless shapes, a language I could hear but never see. On Family Feud, this was manageable during the main game. Steve Harvey would read the question out loud, clear as a bell. I'd listen, focus, and pull an answer from my life experience. I was good at that. I knew people, I knew what they'd say. But looming over the entire experience, casting a dark shadow over our surprising success, was the final round. Fast money. We won the main game on the final question. The other family needed to steal, and they whiffed. The celebratory music exploded from the speakers, confetti rained down, and my family mobbed me in a group hug. Sarah was sobbing into my shoulder, whispering, "We did it, Dave. We did it." Leo was jumping up and down, his face flushed with victory. All I could feel was a cold, creeping dread. The $320 we'd won so far was nice, but it wasn't why we were here. We were here for the $20,000. We were here for Lily. Our youngest daughter, Lily, was 7 years old, and she was fighting a battle that no child should ever face. The medical bills were a mountain, and we were buried at the bottom of it. That 20 grand wouldn't solve everything, but it would be a lifeline. It would be a breath of air when we were drowning. It was everything. "All right, Miller family!" Steve Harvey's booming voice cut through my thoughts. He clapped me on the back, his diamond ring glinting in the hot lights. "Congratulations! Now, I need 2 of you to play fast money for $20,000. My family looked at me. It was a given. Leo, our quickest thinker, and me, the captain. It had to be. Sarah was too nervous, and Carol would probably give 5 joke answers. "It's gonna be me and Leo," I said, my voice sounding more confident than I felt. "All right. Leo, you were on fire today, my man. You're up first. The rest of you, go stand over there with the lovely Sarah. Don't you give him no help. Steve joked, guiding Sarah and Carol to the side of the stage. I gave Leo a quick, tight hug. "You got this, son," I whispered. "Just see the board. Be smart." "Don't worry, Dad." "I'll leave you an easy job," he said with a wink. I watched from the sidelines, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. The 20 seconds started, and Leo was a machine. He was calm, focused, spitting out answers before Steve could even finish the questions. "Name a fruit you might eat for breakfast." "Banana." "Something you find in a toolbox." "Hammer." He was incredible. When the buzzer sounded, he sagged against the podium, breathless. We went through his answers one by one. The points racked up: 32, 45, 60. When it was all said and done, he had 168 points. The audience applauded. Steve was beaming. 168 points. That is a fantastic score. Your dad only needs 32 points to win $20,000. 32 points. It was nothing. A single good answer could do it. My family was beaming, their faces full of pure, unadulterated hope. This was it. The finish line was right there. All I had to do was cross it. My walk to the center stage felt like a mile. Steve gave me a reassuring pat. "All right, Dave. You heard the score. 32 little bitty points stand between you and a brand new car, or whatever you want to buy with $20,000. You ready to do this for your family?" I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He turned me away from the board and reread the questions Leo had already answered. I tried to clear my mind, tried to come up with different answers. The pressure was immense. The whole world felt like it was sitting on my chest. Then it was time. Steve turned me back towards the giant screen. "All right, Dave. We're putting 25 seconds on the clock this time. I'm going to ask you the same 5 questions. Try not to duplicate Leo's answers. If you do, you'll hear this sound." He gestured, and a horrible buzz echoed through the studio. "And I'll say, 'Try again.' You got it?" I nodded again, my eyes fixed on the board. The questions were displayed there in big white letters. To me, they were just scribbles, a foreign code. My brain couldn't process them. I could feel the panic rising, hot and fast, clawing its way up my throat. My vision started to tunnel. The cheering audience faded into a dull roar. "Let's put 25 seconds on the clock," Steve announced. His voice sounded like it was coming from a great distance. "And the time starts now. Name a fruit you might eat for breakfast." He was looking at me. The camera was on me. My family was watching me. The letters on the screen swam before my eyes, mocking me. I couldn't breathe. My carefully constructed world, my lifetime of hiding and pretending, was about to crumble in front of millions of people. There was no way out. The clock was ticking. In a moment of pure, gut-wrenching desperation, I leaned in so close to Steve Harvey, my shoulder brushed his, and I whispered the 3 words that had defined my entire life, my voice cracking with shame. "Steve, I can't read." His smile didn't just fade, it vanished. The comical, larger-than-life host disappeared, and for a split second, I saw a man looking at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. The timer buzzed relentlessly in the background. The whole world was watching, and I had just placed my family's entire future into the hands of a stranger on live television. For a fraction of a second, the universe seemed to hold its breath. The ticking clock, the cheering crowd, the hum of the studio lights, it all faded into a dull, distant buzz. There was only Steve Harvey's face, inches from mine. The jovial mask he wore for television had slipped, and I saw a flicker of raw, unfiltered shock in his eyes, quickly followed by something else, a deep, penetrating focus. He didn't pull away. He didn't call for a producer. He held my gaze, and in that moment, it felt like he was looking right through my borrowed suit and into the scared, helpless kid I'd always been. The 25-second timer on the big screen hit 19. Without breaking eye contact with me, Steve raised his left hand, palm out, a gesture so subtle most people wouldn't have noticed it. "Hold it! Hold it!" he said, his voice a smooth, calm river cutting through the chaos. He turned slightly, shielding his mouth from the audience and the cameras. "Stop the clock!" We got a little, flicker in the monitor here. I want to make sure Dave can see it clear. Can't have him at a disadvantage, can we? A producer's voice squawked in his earpiece, but Steve just waved a dismissive hand. He leaned back in towards me, his voice now a low, urgent murmur that was for me and me alone. "Okay, Dave. Look at me. Don't look at that screen. The screen doesn't exist anymore. You understand? There's only you and me in this room." I could only manage a numb nod, my entire body trembling. I had just detonated a bomb in the middle of my own life, and instead of chaos and shrapnel, this man was trying to calmly diffuse it. "I'm going to ask you the questions again," he continued, his tone patient but firm, like a teacher with a student he refused to let fail. "You just listen to my voice. Nothing else matters. Just listen to me. Can you do that?" "Yes," I breathed out, the word tasting like ash. "Good man." He straightened up, the professional smile snapping back into place as if it had never left. "All right, we're all good. Just a little technical gremlin. Let's put a fresh 25 seconds on the clock for Dave. Fair is fair." The audience cheered their approval. They had no idea the game they were watching had fundamentally changed. It wasn't Family Feud anymore. It was something else entirely. "Here we go, Dave," Steve boomed, but his eyes were locked on mine, conveying a different message. "I've got you. Just play. 25 seconds on the clock. Starts now. Name a fruit you might eat for breakfast." My mind, which had been a hurricane of panic, suddenly found a single calm point to focus on. His voice. The letters on the board were still there, still mocking me, but they were blurry now, out of focus. Leo had said banana. I pictured Sarah cutting up fruit for the kids in the morning. "Orange," I said, my voice hoarse. "Ding!" The board lit up. 18 points. A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me. The crowd applauded. I needed 14 more points. "Something you find in a toolbox," Steve said, his cadence slow and deliberate. This was my world. This was easy. Leo had said hammer. I thought of the weight of my tool belt. "A screwdriver," I said, with a sliver more confidence. Ding! Another 22 points. The board flashed 40. We had done it. My total score was 208. The audience erupted. The music swelled. I felt a dizzying, light-headed joy. We'd won. We'd actually won. "Name a type of vehicle with flashing lights," Steve continued, reading through the list as the celebration began to build. Leo's answer, "police car," was revealed. I barely heard him. I was looking past the lights, at the side of the stage. Sarah was holding Carol, both of them jumping up and down. Leo had his fists in the air, a look of pure triumph on his face. They were so proud. The weight of the world, the shame I had carried for 40 years, felt like it was lifting. For my daughter, for Lily. It was all worth it. But Steve wasn't finished. He still had to go through my answers. All right, Dave, let's see what you said, he announced, turning to the board with a flourish. Name a fruit you might eat for breakfast. You said, orange. The number 3 answer. 18 people said that. Your family's got 186. The audience cheered again. Next, we asked you, something you find in a toolbox. You said, a screwdriver. Show me screwdriver. The board began to cycle through the answers. Number 1, drill. Number 2, wrench. Number 3, tape measure. My heart sank into my stomach. It kept going. 4, saw. 5, pliers. The word screwdriver was nowhere to be seen. A big red X appeared next to the question. A sympathetic "all" rippled through the audience. I had 0 points for that answer. We were back to 168. Suddenly, the air was thick with tension again. The easy victory had vanished. We still needed 32 points. I had 3 questions left. Steve's smile was a little tighter now. That's all right, Dave, that's all right. Shook it off. Plenty of game left. Name a type of vehicle with flashing lights. You said... He paused, looking at me. But I hadn't answered that one. The buzzer for my first round of answers had gone off before I could. He'd won me the time, but he couldn't give me the answers. He looked from me to the board, a flicker of confusion on his own face. The game had stopped and restarted so quickly, the sequence was a blur. He had to play it by the book now. Okay, Dave, he said, recovering smoothly. We still need 32 points. Let's see what you said for question number 3. Name a type of vehicle with flashing lights. My mouth went dry. My mind was a complete and utter blank. I stared at him, my eyes pleading. The whole studio was silent, waiting for an answer I didn't have. In the chaos of the restart, in the emotional whiplash of my confession and his incredible act of kindness, I had completely frozen after the first 2 questions. I hadn't given a third answer. The clock had run out with my mouth shut and my mind empty. Steve held his pose for a beat longer, the perfect showman, before letting a pained expression cross his face. Dave, you didn't give an answer, my man. He turned to the solemn judge off camera, who gave a slow, definitive shake of the head. The sound that followed wasn't a buzzer. It was the sound of a dream dying, a soft, final whoosh from the sound system, indicating a round was over. The game was finished. My final score was 186. We were 14 points short. We had lost. The silence in the studio was a physical thing. It pressed in on my ears, heavy and suffocating. The jubilant music had been cut off so abruptly it felt like a power outage. All the air seemed to have been sucked out of the room, leaving only the dull hum of the air conditioning and the frantic, useless thumping of my own heart. 186. The numbers glowed on the board, a monument to my failure. 14 points. We lost by 14 miserable points. From the side of the stage I could see my family. The victorious smiles were gone, replaced by masks of stunned disbelief. Sarah's hands were clasped over her mouth, her eyes wide and glistening with tears that hadn't yet fallen. Leo just stared, his shoulders slumped, the weight of a 19-year-old who had done his part perfectly and watched it all fall apart. He wasn't looking at the board. He was looking at me. And in his eyes I saw not anger, but a profound, gut-wrenching confusion. He couldn't understand. How could I not have come up with a single other answer? How could I have frozen so completely? Steve Harvey stood beside me, his showman's posture gone. He looked genuinely pained. "Oh, man," he said, his voice soft, the microphone carrying his disappointment to every corner of the silent studio. Dave, my man. We were so close, so close. He put a hand on my shoulder, a gesture of comfort that felt more like the hand of an executioner. The warmth of the lights was gone, replaced by a cold, clinical glare. I felt exposed, stripped bare in front of millions of strangers, my deepest shame and my most public failure laid out for all to see. The theme music started to play again, a cheerful, upbeat tune that was a grotesque mockery of the mood. It was the music of defeat, the soundtrack for ushering the losers off the stage. Steve had to finish the show. He turned to the camera. The Miller family gave it a valiant effort, folks. They're walking away with a grand total of $320. Let's hear it for the Millers. The audience clapped, a polite, pitying sound that was 1,000 times worse than silence. My family started the slow, agonizing walk from the side of the stage to join me in the center, the walk of shame. Sarah forced a watery smile as she reached me, her hand finding mine. It was cold as ice. "It's okay, honey," she whispered, but her voice was choked with unshed tears. It wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. Leo came and stood next to me, refusing to meet my eyes. Carol tried to put a brave face on it, patting my back and saying, "Hey, we tried." It was fun, but her voice lacked its usual booming conviction. We were a tableau of defeat, a family portrait of disappointment. I had failed them. I had failed Lily. The $20,000, that lifeline, that single ray of hope in a dark tunnel, had slipped through my fingers because of a secret I was too cowardly to ever confront. As the credits began to roll on the monitors, a producer, a young woman with a headset and a clipboard, scurried onto the stage. "Great show, everyone," she said with a plastic smile. "Millers, if you'll just follow me, we'll get your paperwork sorted out." Paperwork. The word sent a jolt of fresh panic through me. More forms to stare at blankly, more documents to pretend to understand before scrawling my name at the bottom. We were led off the stage, away from the bright lights, and into the dim, cluttered backstage area. The moment we were out of sight of the audience, the fragile dam of my family's composure broke. Sarah finally let the tears come, silent sobs shaking her shoulders. Leo kicked a stray cable on the floor, a flash of angry frustration on his face. "I don't get it, Dad!" He finally burst out, turning to face me. "An ambulance! A fire truck! Anything! Why didn't you say anything?" "Leo, not now," Sarah pleaded, wiping her eyes. "No, I want to know," he insisted, his voice cracking. "We had it. It was right there. You just stopped." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. What could I say? "I'm sorry, son. The reason we lost the money we desperately need for your sister is that your father is a fraud who can't even read the questions." The secret I had guarded my entire life was a poison, and it had finally leached out and sickened everything I loved. The shame was a physical taste in my mouth, bitter and metallic. Suddenly, a deep voice cut through our private hell. "Give the man some space." We all turned. It was Steve Harvey. He had followed us off stage. He wasn't smiling. He had taken off his jacket, and his face was etched with a seriousness I had only seen for that one fleeting second during the game. He looked directly at Leo. "Your father did his best. This game, it's a pressure cooker. Sometimes your mind just goes blank. It happens." Leo looked down, chastened but still confused. Steve then turned his attention to me. He gestured with his head toward a small private hallway away from the crew, who were now busy breaking down the set. "Dave, can I talk to you for a minute?" Alone. My blood ran cold. This was it. He was going to call me out. Maybe the show had rules against what I'd done, what he'd done. Maybe we were going to be disqualified, have to give back the measly $320. My family looked at me, their expressions a mixture of fear and curiosity. I gave Sarah a shaky look and nodded, my feet feeling like lead as I followed Steve down the corridor. He led me into a small, empty dressing room and closed the door behind us. The room was bare except for a sofa and a small table. The silence was deafening. He didn't speak for what felt like an eternity. He just stood there, studying my face, his own expression unreadable. I felt like a bug under a microscope. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and devoid of its on-air boom. I grew up in Cleveland. My dad was a coal miner, a good man, a smart man, could fix anything, build anything, tell you the life story of every person on our block. He paused, his eyes drilling into mine. But he couldn't read a newspaper to save his life. He'd sit there every morning with it open, staring at the pictures, pretending, just so his sons wouldn't think their old man was less than. My breath hitched in my chest. I stared at him, my carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. "You think I didn't see you up there?" he continued, his voice softening with an empathy that hit me harder than any accusation could have. "You think I don't know that look?" That's the look of a man who's been treading water his whole life, terrified that one wrong move will pull him under. What you did up there, whispering that to me, that took more guts than winning any game show. He took a step closer. "But the show's over, Dave. And you and I both know why your family lost that money. And it wasn't because you're not smart enough." He sighed, a heavy, weary sound. "The network rules are the network rules. The game is over. The loss is official. There's nothing I can do about that." My last flicker of hope died. Of course, it was over. "But," he said, and the word hung in the air between us, charged with possibility. He reached into the inside pocket of his trousers, his movements slow and deliberate. My eyes followed his hand as he pulled out a personal checkbook and a pen. My brain struggled to process what I was seeing. A checkbook. A simple, leather-bound checkbook in Steve Harvey's hand. He clicked the pen, a sharp, definitive sound in the quiet room. He didn't say another word. He just opened the checkbook on the small table, leaned over, and began to write. The scratching of the pen on the paper was the only sound. It felt louder than the roar of the studio audience had been just minutes earlier. I stood there, frozen, a statue of disbelief. My mind was reeling, trying to catch up with the reality of the moment. Was this a prank? A dream? Was he writing a check for the consolation prize? $100 for our trouble? I watched his hand move across the paper, forming numbers. I couldn't read the words, of course, but I knew numbers. I saw him write a 2, then a 0, followed by a comma, and then 3 more zeros. $20,000. He tore the check from the book with a neat, precise rip and held it out to me. My hand wouldn't move. My arm felt like it was made of lead. It was as if my body refused to believe what my eyes were seeing. "Take it, Dave," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "This isn't from the show. This isn't from the network. This is from me, from a coal miner's son to a man who works with his hands. This is for Lily." The mention of my daughter's name broke the spell. A sob caught in my throat, a raw, painful sound. My hand, trembling violently, reached out and took the check from him. I looked down at it. My name, David Miller, written in clear, strong script. And that impossible number. The weight of it, this thin piece of paper, felt immense. It was the weight of a hospital bill paid. It was the weight of a night's sleep without worry. It was the weight of hope. I can't, I stammered, the words thick with emotion. No, I can't accept this. Yes, you can, Steve said, his gaze unwavering. You can and you will. Look, money is just paper, man. But what it can do for your little girl, that's real. What you did for your family, getting them this far, hiding what you go through every single day just to keep their world steady, that's real too. Don't let pride rob your daughter of this. He paused, letting the words sink in. But I'm going to ask for something in return. My heart sank. Of course. There was a catch. This check is for Lily, he said, tapping the paper in my hand. But the next thing you do has to be for you. You find a program, an adult literacy class. You make a phone call tomorrow morning. You've been carrying this boulder on your back your whole life, Dave. It's time to put it down. You owe it to yourself. More importantly, you owe it to that boy out there who looks at you like you're Superman. Show him that his dad is strong enough to ask for help. That's the deal. Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and unstoppable. They weren't tears of shame or failure anymore. They were tears of overwhelming, crushing gratitude. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, a frantic, jerky motion. I nodded until my neck hurt. He clapped me on the shoulder, a solid, grounding gesture. Good man, he said. He then opened the door and gestured for me to go first. Now go tell your family. Walking back down that hallway was the reverse of the walk of shame I'd taken just moments before. My feet felt light. The check was clutched in my hand, a sacred text I couldn't read, but whose meaning I understood with every fiber of my being. Sarah, Leo, and Carol were huddled together, their faces etched with worry. They looked up as I approached, their eyes immediately falling on the slip of paper in my hand. Dave? What is that? What happened? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. I couldn't form a sentence. My throat was too tight. I simply walked over to Leo and held the check out to him. He took it tentatively, his eyes scanning it. His brow furrowed in confusion, and then his eyes shot wide open. His jaw dropped. Dad, he whispered, his voice cracking. Dad, what is this? This is for $20,000. And then, right there, in the cluttered, dim backstage of a television studio, I finally put the boulder down. I looked at my son, my brilliant, quick-witted son, who had been unknowingly reading for me his whole life. It's for Lily, I said, my voice finally steady. And it's time I told you all something. I told them everything, the whole story, about the shame I felt in first grade when the letters just looked like squiggles, about the tricks I'd developed to hide it, about pretending to read the newspaper with Leo, the secret pain and pride I felt as he helped me navigate a world I couldn't decipher. I told them why I froze in the fast money round, and I told them what Steve Harvey had said to me in that room. When I finished, there was a profound silence. Leo was looking at the check, and then at me, and then back at the check. Tears were rolling down his cheeks. He wasn't confused anymore. He was looking at me with an expression of such profound understanding and love that it took my breath away. He finally understood all the little moments, all the times I'd asked him to double-check a form or read a menu out loud. It wasn't a weakness, it was a struggle. Sarah wrapped her arms around me, burying her face in my chest. She wasn't crying for the money we had almost lost. She was crying for the decades of silent struggle I had endured all alone. "Oh, Dave," she sobbed, "why didn't you ever tell me?" I was too ashamed, I whispered into her hair, holding her tight. Leo stepped forward and wrapped his arms around both of us, Carol joining in until we were one big, weeping, laughing mess. The game show, the lights, the audience, it all faded away. In that moment, we weren't the Miller family who had lost on television. We were just a family, closer and more honest than we had ever been before. We had lost the game, but we had won something so much more valuable. And as I held my family, the check safe in my pocket, I knew my promise to Steve Harvey was the easiest one I would ever have to keep. My first phone call tomorrow wouldn't be to the hospital to pay a bill. It would be to the local community college. I was finally going to learn to read.